Democratic Congressman Al Green's removal from the Capitol chamber during President Donald Trump's speech provides a glimpse into the highly charged political environment that characterized his presidency. Green, a representative from Texas, has long been a vocal critic of Trump, particularly in the context of impeachment proceedings. On the day of the speech, his actions led to an unusual and highly publicized confrontation, underscoring the deep divisions within American politics at the time. The incident occurred during one of Trump's speeches in the U.S. Capitol, where Green stood up and began to protest the president's policies, specifically criticizing his handling of various national issues. Green, who had been one of the staunchest advocates for impeachment, voiced his dissent in a manner that disrupted the proceedings. His actions were not just a personal protest, but symbolized the growing frustration among many Democratic lawmakers and their constituents over the president's controversial actions. Green's removal by the Sergeant-at-Arms was a rare and significant moment in congressional history. It served as a reminder of the often contentious nature of modern American politics, where individuals who challenge the status quo, particularly in the context of Trump's presidency, can face swift and sometimes harsh consequences. As Green was escorted out of the chamber, the Republican side of the aisle began chanting "Goodbye," a stark demonstration of the partisan divide that had become increasingly evident in Congress. The chant, which seemed to be both a rebuke of Green's actions and a celebration of his removal, reflected the broader animosity between the parties. It underscored how the lines between Democrats and Republicans had become not just ideological, but intensely personal. The Republican members in the chamber, many of whom had been loyal to Trump, appear to see Green's protest as an affront to the institution and to the president himself. In contrast, Green and many of his Democratic colleagues viewed the president's policies as harmful to the country and its values, leading to a cycle of tension and confrontation. The incident also highlighted the role of the Sergeant-at-Arms, who is responsible for maintaining order in the chamber. In this case, the Sergeant-at-Arms had to step in to ensure that the speech could continue without further interruption. While the removal of a member from the chamber is not a frequent occurrence, it is sometimes necessary to maintain decorum and prevent disruptions that could hinder the legislative process. Green's protest was not isolated, but part of a broader pattern of resistance from progressive lawmakers during Trump's tenure. Many Democrats, especially those representing districts with large minority populations or progressive leanings, felt a moral obligation to challenge the president's agenda. This challenge often took the form of impeachment proceedings, vocal opposition to policies such as immigration restrictions, and outspoken condemnation of the president's rhetoric, which many saw as divisive and harmful to national unity. The dynamics of impeachment played a crucial role in the unfolding drama. Green, having previously led efforts to bring articles of impeachment against Trump, was one of the first members of Congress to publicly call for Trump's removal from office. His insistence on impeachment, despite limited support from his own party, made him a polarizing figure. While many Democrats were hesitant to fully embrace impeachment as a strategy, Green remained steadfast, arguing that Trump's actions, ranging from his handling of the Russia investigation to his conduct surrounding the Ukraine scandal, constituted impeachable offenses. The debate over impeachment would come to a head later that year when the House of Representatives, under the leadership of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, eventually voted to impeach Trump. However, the Senate, controlled by Republicans, acquitted him, ensuring that Trump would remain in office for the duration of his term. The impeachment saga, though, would become a defining feature of Trump's presidency and the political landscape of the time. Green's vocal opposition to Trump and his call for impeachment were part of a larger trend of resistance within the Democratic Party. As the party's progressive wing gained more influence, many lawmakers began to see Trump not just as a political opponent, but as a threat to the country's democratic institutions. This growing sense of urgency led to a series of protests, sit-ins, and other forms of civil disobedience aimed at drawing attention to the perceived dangers posed by Trump's presidency. On the other hand, Republicans, who had rallied behind Trump throughout his time in office, viewed his presidency as a restoration of conservative values and an opportunity to undo what they saw as the overreach of the Obama administration. For many in the GOP, Trump was a champion of traditional American values, from economic nationalism to a more restrictive stance on immigration. These positions resonated deeply with his base, which included white working-class voters, evangelical Christians, and rural Americans who felt left behind by the political establishment. The rivalry between Democrats and Republicans, embodied in moments like Greene's protest and the ensuing chants of "goodbye," became a symbol of the broader cultural and political divides that were taking shape across the country. In the Capitol chamber, the lines between the two parties were drawn not just in terms of policy differences, but in terms of identity, values, and vision for the future of America. The spectacle of a member of Congress being removed from the chamber in such a dramatic fashion also raised questions about the state of political discourse in the United States. What had once been a more civil and reserved process of disagreement had evolved into an environment of open confrontation, where speeches, protests, and even chants could be used as tools of political expression. This shift reflected the broader polarization that was taking hold of American society, where debates were increasingly taking place not just in legislative halls, but in social media, town halls, and public demonstrations. While Greene's removal from the chamber was a particularly high-profile incident, it was far from the only example of disruption and protest in Congress during this period. Throughout Trump's presidency, both Democrats and Republicans found themselves at odds not just over policy, but over the very principles that guided their approach to governance. For Democrats, issues such as health care, climate change, and racial justice were key points of contention, while Republicans focused on tax cuts, deregulation, and a tougher stance on immigration. As tensions between the parties reached new heights, the question of how to govern in such a polarized environment became a central concern. For many Democrats, the prospect of working with Trump or his Republican allies seemed increasingly distant. At the same time, Republicans found themselves defending a president whose behavior and rhetoric had alienated many traditional conservatives. The result was a political standoff, with little room for compromise or meaningful bipartisan cooperation. In the midst of this turmoil, Al Green's actions served as a powerful reminder of the stakes involved in the battle for America's future. For those who viewed Trump as a threat to the country's democracy, Greene's protest was an expression of defiance and resistance.